Welcome to Command the Media. We're going to be discussing a little bit more about Illustrator today. Illustrator is, of course, a great program for making things that are more than just illustrations. We can do all kinds of things with Illustrator. We can do logos, we can do vector graphics of any sort. Today we're going to be doing a specific type of graphic. It's called an infographic. It's where we can display a wealth of information, providing lots of information in a pictorial way for people who have a hard time just looking at charts of data. Specifically, we're going to be making this infographic. This is very simple as far as infographics are concerned. We just have a Dixie State University logo. We've got an image back here in the back, but the highlight of this is this chart. And this chart gives us a very, very pictorial representation of, in this case, the tuition for Utah public colleges and university. Notice that the only four-year school on the list that has the lowest tuition is right here at Dixie. At least that's the way it was in 2015 and 2016. So let's talk about how to make this graphic. I'm going to go up to the File menu, and I'm going to select New. From this menu, I'm going to go over to the Print Templates, and I'm going to select Letter if it's not already selected. It's 612 points by 792 points, which if we were to convert that into inches, there's 72 points in an inch. And actually, we could just do this and do it the really easy way, but it's 8.5 by 11. This is a typical American letter-sized sheet of paper, and it's going to be oriented in the portrait style. There's going to be only one artboard, which is where we're going to do the main elements of our infographic, and there's no bleed on this. Lastly, it's a 300 PPI CMYK color mode. CMYK because we intend to print this. PPI also 300, needs to be at least high enough that it's going to look good printed. So we're going to go ahead and select Create. This now is our representation of our 8.5 by 11 American letter style sheet of paper. I'm going to go ahead and just hit my Command S or Control S if you're using a PC, and I'm going to save this really quick as Infographic Sample. And I'm just going to put it in this current directory. I'll save that, and then I'll select the defaults for the version of Illustrator that I am currently using. So the first thing I need to do is I need some data. I have in my Finder right now, I have a chart of data that is this tuition and fees.pdf. And if I go ahead and open that, I'm going to just open it up in preview, we can look that this is a lot of information. Even if I zoom in on this, this is just a table of data, and I'll tell you what, most people are like, man, when I see all kinds of numbers like this, I just go nuts crazy. And that's coming from me who likes to moonlight as a mathematician. But this, as you can tell, it's the tuition by semester credit hour load for resident undergraduate students, and this USHE, that's the Utah System of Higher Education. So these are all colleges in the American state of Utah. And if we look at this 12 credit hour, here, this is the data that we're actually going to use for this infographic. I can't even highlight it without it being all messed up. So we're just going to take this 12 credit load and we're going to create a chart based on that. So if I Command Tab back over to Illustrator, or use Control Tab, or Alternate Tab I should say if you're using your PC, I'm going to come down here to the charts. Way down here at the bottom, I've got the column graph tool, J on the keyboard, and as you can see, I've got lots of charts to choose from. The one we're going to use is the column graph tool, but if you wanted to use a pie chart or any sort of chart you can possibly imagine, they're all available here in Illustrator. So I'll select column chart tool, and I'm just going to drag a chart out here that's going to take up about the bottom half of my document. As soon as I do that, it's going to produce one bar for me, and it's going to produce this scale along the left-hand side, and it's going to open up this data window. This data window is where we're going to put the information that we find on this chart on the row that has 12 credits. So I'm going to start in this first cell, and I'm going to round this first number to the nearest dollar, so it's going to be 29.64. And I'll just type in 29.64, making sure if I need to have my number lock on, I have my number lock on. On my computer, it doesn't need to happen, but if you're using a PC with an extra keyboard or even a Mac, you might need to look at that number lock. I'll look at the next value over, 29.64, now I've got 28.09, 28.09, and I'll just hit the tab in between each one of these numbers. I'm gonna go ahead and extend this out as well. Now, rather than bothering you with me entering all this data in, I'm going to go ahead and cut the video and come back to it. All right, here we are back. I've entered all these numbers in now. I've double checked them now. I've got 8 schools along the top. I've got 8 numbers here, and if my numbers are not quite right, that's okay. For the purposes of this video, I'm not going to worry about it, but I've got them all entered in, and now I'm just going to hit the check box over here in the upper right-hand corner of this data chart. What happens now, I'm going to go ahead and close the data chart because I'm finished with it, is I now have this chart that's been filled in with all of the information that I've put into that data window. I'm going to go ahead and move to my selection tool, and I'm just going to move it so that I can see the scale a little bit easier along this side. You can tell all of our numbers were between $3,000 and about $1,500, and so you can see all these bars are in there along with the scale along the left-hand side. Once I've double-checked that all that information is correct, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to ungroup this. So I'll go up to the Object menu and select Ungroup. The shortcut for it is Shift-Command-G. Sometimes that'll happen. Now, this warning is going to come up as soon as I do that. It's going to say that this selection contains a graph, which is true. When we created this, we used one of the graph tools. And what this is saying is as soon as we push yes, it's going to break this from being a graph, and we're not going to be able to change the data in that data chart anymore. If we wanted to make changes to it, we're going to actually have to physically change the length of bars and things like that. I've double-checked the data. I'm not worried about it. I'm just going to go ahead and click yes. So now we've got this one group on here. If I go to my layers window, I've got the one layer that has everything on it. I'll drill that down, and I can see I've got 4 groups in here. As I eyeball each of these down, we can see that I've got a baseline or a background. I've got the bars themselves. I've got the scale on the left-hand side along with its marks, its tick marks, and then I've got the bottom part of this graph. So I'm going to go ahead and drill into the bars themselves, and you can see now I have individual bars within this chart that I can manipulate. Now, of course, I could just double-click. I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. But right now, I'm just going to select this first bar, and I'm going to do that using my Layers menu. This is my first bar, and if I click this little circle right here on the right-hand side, you can see that it selects it. So that's one way for us to select one element specifically within our composition. Another way of doing this, I'll go ahead and show you. I hinted to it just a little bit early. I'm going to go ahead and deselect by clicking out here on the paste board. And if I try and select just the one bar with just a single click, you can see it's selecting all of the bars because these are all grouped together. In order to step into this group, I need to double click. As soon as I double click, you'll notice these breadcrumbs that show up here in the upper left-hand corner. So I used to be on layer 1, now I'm showing this group within my layer 1 layer. It's the same thing as being right here on the layers palette. You can see I'm within that group. Now if I select just that first bar, you'll notice that it does the exact same thing as we had before. It's the same thing as if I was pushing this. But by double clicking, I step into the group, then I'm allowed to just click within that group one element of the group. So that's a second way of selecting. I've got this one bar, and what I want to do is I want to use the colors of the school that this belongs to. So if I go back to my data, I can see this is the University of Utah. That's what U of U is. And I want to use their official school color. So I'll do that by just going to Safari. And I'm going to go ahead and just type in Safari, University of Utah colors. You can see it looks like I've searched that before. I'm going to look for keywords like visual style or style guide or branding, something like that. That's going to be the information that provides the official colors for our schools that we're going to be using. I'll click on that and I'll scroll down and I see this University Red. This is the official University of Utah red color. I'm looking for CMYK because that's the color mode I'm using, and I can see the code here for CMYK. I've got 0 for cyan, 100 for magenta, 79 for yellow, and 20 for black. So I'll go ahead and just bring those numbers in. I've got this selected. I need to change the color. I'm going to go ahead and use the colors palette to do that. So I'll select Window, Color. Bring my color palette over here where it's a little bit easier for me to see. And we can see that the default for this bar when this was created was for it to be in grayscale. And we can tell because of the K of course being short for black, this is just grayscale. I can either do white, I can do black, or I can do some shade in between. Obviously I want to have a color, so I need to change the mode. I can't have color in a grayscale mode. So I'm going to click on the hamburger right here and select CMYK. As soon as I select CMYK, I have CMYK here, and I can put those values in. I've got 0, 100, 79, and 20. So I'll put all those numbers in. I'm going to Command Tab back over here just to make sure that I got them right. Sure enough, here's my University of Utah red. Now, I could do that for all these schools along here. I just want to go along the top of my data window: Utah State, Weber State, Southern Utah University, Snow College, Dixie State University, Utah Valley University, and Salt Lake Community College. But rather than going through that whole process a number of times, I actually have it over here for us, where I'm just going to copy this that I've already done, and I'm going to replace this one on the one that we're currently working on. So I'll just select all that information. Now I'm just going to go ahead and paste this in, and I'm going to go ahead and close my color palette. So again, it's just that same process. Selecting each bar, I might have to step into it, or I might use my layers palette just to make sure I've got that bar selected, use my color palette, change it from grayscale to CMYK, and then input the values that I found on the internet. All right, so this looks great. We've got all the school colors here, but one of the things that's important for us, I think, to acknowledge is that these are dollars right here. So we want to change and add a dollar sign, and also we probably should add some commas. I'm here in the United States, so certainly we're going to use some commas because that's the way the United States does things. I'm going to go ahead and double click in there, and I'm going to use my type tool, which is the big capital T along here, or T on the keyboard is the shortcut. And I'm just going to go ahead and just bring my cursor in there by clicking inside there, use my arrow keys on my keyboard, and I'm going to put a dollar sign in, and I'm going to put a comma in. Then I'm going to come over here to the next one down, and rather than putting the dollar sign in a number of times, I think everybody who sees this will recognize, because of the dollar sign along the top, that I really have dollars all the way along, that all of these values are in dollars. Now, as soon as I did that, it changed the way that bounding box looked. I'm going to go ahead and just select it with a single click, and I'm just literally just using my left arrow key along with my shift key held down just to bump that back over. And I want it to be lined up. If I want it to be perfect, then I am going to go ahead and just select all of those by drawing a box around them. And I'm going to use my Align palette, go to Window, Align. I'll bring that up here where we can see it. And I want to align the objects to the horizontal right. So I'll go ahead and click that, and that makes it so that every single one of these bounding boxes now is aligned perfectly on that right-hand side. I'll deselect and I'll check it. Everything looks great. So now I've got dollars here, I've got commas here because I'm in the United States, everything looks good. Now I need to put some labels here because it's impossible just based on the school color for anyone other than myself, I guess, who's really familiar with these colors, to know which of these schools is which or which of these colors is which. So I'll go ahead and go to my type tool. I'm just going to draw a quick bounding box, and I'm going to put Utah, the word Utah, in because this bar is the University of Utah. I'll select all that text. And I'm going to come up here to Window, select Control. That brings my control window up here along the top. And because I'm currently using my text tool, I have the ability to change my character or my paragraph. Because I've got such a small window here because I'm currently on television, I am not able to see all those things. So I'm actually going to go here to Window, scroll down to the Type, and choose Character. That's going to open up my Type menu. And this allows me to change the font and change the font size. I'm going to go ahead and increase the font size. And I'm going to change the font. And I'm a big fan of Avenir Next for this particular font, but you can go with whatever suits your fancy. I'm going to come over here to the paragraph palette, and I'm going to click on Align Center, which is going to center this word inside of its bounding box. And I'm going to go ahead and close that palette. I will go ahead and now go to my selection tool. Now what I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in by hitting Command plus sign a couple of times. If you're on a PC, it's going to be Control plus sign. I want to align the left-hand side of this bounding box with the left-hand side of this bar and the right-hand side with the right-hand side of this bar. So I'll go ahead and just click and drag this handle until I see one of my guides come up. We can see the purple guide comes up. That shows they're aligned. I'll go ahead and let go. Come over here to the handle. Notice this is the handle I'm looking for, not the big white box here, but the handle just above it. I'm going to click, and I'm going to hold it just on that right-hand side as well. And just to clean it up, I'll go ahead and bring the bottom up just a little bit. Now that it's there, it's perfectly aligned. I'm going to go ahead and bring it up just a bit using just my shift and my up arrow. I've got it lined up the way I want it. I've got it the size I want it. I got it the font I want it. I just want to copy this word now, and I'll use the exact same word, the exact same setup all the way along here. I'm going to do that by holding my Option key down, bringing my mouse inside the rectangle, clicking and dragging to the right until I see those two guides come up. The one says it's aligned to the center of the box on its left. The one up above says it's aligned to the center of that bar up above it, which is exactly where I want. So I'll go ahead and let go of the mouse first, then the Option key. And since I've got this right here, I'm going to go ahead and just double click inside it, double click again. That's going to select all that text. And this one is Utah State University, so I'll just do USU for that one. And I'll hit Command Enter or Command Return. If you're on a PC, it's going to be Control Return. I'm going to do the same thing, hold the Option key down, bring this on over, align it up, let go of the mouse, then let go of the Option. Double click again. This is WSU, or Weber State University. I'll hit Command Return, hold the Option key down, bring the next one over, double click again. This one is Southern Utah University. I'll go ahead and just scroll a little bit. SUU, Command Return. And rather than making these 4 copies again, I'm going to go ahead and just select all 4 of these by drawing a box that touches all 4 of them. Hold my Option key down, and then just drag them over until they're aligned perfectly with the side of that orange box. And then I know the rest of them will be perfect. I'll deselect them, double click in here, double click again. We've got snow for this one. I'll come back to the fact that this doesn't fit in just a second. Double click this one, double click again. This is going to be Dixie State University, which is where I currently am. Command Return, double click, select all by double clicking again. This is going to be Utah Valley University. Double click, and this last one is going to be Salt Lake Community College. Notice also that this one doesn't fit. We know when things don't fit, and that's the thing. Illustrator is always going to alert us when things don't fit by giving us that little red indicator. That's one thing you always should be looking for anytime you're doing any of these projects. Illustrator is going to try and help you to see where you could be running amok. Now, obviously for us, it's obvious that the text doesn't fit in there because we can't see all of it. But if we look, we can see this little red indicator. This means that the text is overset inside this bounding box. So I'm going to go ahead just with my selection tool. And since Slick is already over here, Salt Lake Community College, I'm going to go ahead and just extend this out just a tiny bit, the bounding box, until that last C fits in there. And then I'm going to bring my mouse inside the box with a single click. I'm going to bring it over until it's aligned to the center of that bar again. Just like that. I'll do the same thing over here. I'll just bring out the size of the bounding box until that extra W fits in. Then I'm going to bring my mouse inside, move it to the left until I see that Smart Guide come up. Then I see that everything is perfect. These boxes are a little bit larger than these ones, but that's okay. They're not interrupting each other. They're not getting in each other's way. If I hit Command 0, I can see this is very readable. Everything looks great. Now, what are we missing? Every chart should have a title. I'm sure if you ever took a math class, oh by golly, those math teachers, they love showing you charts, and they're going to say every chart should have a title. And I'm going to say the exact same thing here. So how are we going to put a title? Well, I'll tell you what. We got it easy because we already have text that's formatted exactly like we want it to be. I'm going to go ahead and just go down here. I'm going to select the word Utah with a single click. I'll hit Command C or Control C. I'll deselect, and then I'm just going to hit Command V, which is going to copy and paste that in. I'm going to hit Command plus sign or Control plus sign. I'm going to bring that up, and then I'm just going to drag the right-hand side way out here. Then I'll hit Command plus sign, Command 0, which is going to bring us back into the document itself. Double click inside this text, double click again, and this is going to be the 2015-2016 tuition for Utah colleges and universities. I'll tell you, it's hard to talk and type at the same time. Now, I anticipate my font being a little bit larger, and it seems to me that I want this to be on 2 lines. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to introduce a carriage return right in here. In fact, let's do it right after the word Utah. So I'm going to delete this space and hit the return, which is going to give me now 2 lines. I'm going to hit Command A or Control A, go back to my character palette, and I'm going to increase the font size. I still like Avenir Next. I'm going to leave it just like that. And then I'm going to deselect. Go to my selection tool, bring the bottom of the bounding box in. This one I'm going to align with the left-hand side of that $sign. I'm going to align the right-hand side with the right-hand side, and then I know that this is exactly centered in my chart. Great. Now, I just want to double check. I've been working in the group the entire time. If you haven't been, that's okay. What we want to do, we're just going to go back to layer 1. If you're already on layer 1, that's okay. You're going to be just like this. We're going to draw a box around everything, and then we're going to group it all up by going Object, Group. And that's going to group up not only the title, but also all the names down here. You can see as soon as I select one, it selects everything. We can also see that I've got layer 1 and I've got the group down in here, which is exactly what I want. All right, now we need to put a logo in here and we need to put a background in here. I do have a background already. It's in my Finder. It's this DSU dorm. These are the Dixie State University Campus View Suites. Should put a plug in there, man. What a nice place to live that would be if you want to live on campus in beautiful St. George, Utah. What I'm going to do is I'm going to Command Tab back to Illustrator. I'm going to go up to File, Place. What this does now, this is important. Anytime you're using place, whether it be in Illustrator, Photoshop, or InDesign, or any of the others, what we're concerned about when we're using place is whether it's going to be embedded within the document itself, meaning the file itself, or whether it's going to be linked from an outside file. In the case of Illustrator, when we place, we're always placing linked, which means that it's going to link to the file itself. And if we move that file out of the way, if we change it, anything we do to that file, it's going to affect the file that we imported into our document in Illustrator. In Photoshop, you might recall on another video that we did, we could either do place embedded or place linked. When we placed embedded, it became a part of that Photoshop document file, and we didn't have to worry about outside files. With Illustrator, we don't have the option. It's going to be linked by default, and so we need to make sure that we keep track of that dsudorm.png image, that it always stays in that same folder that we have it in, and that we don't ever lose it. But the pros of it are if we make changes to that image, then as soon as we open up our document here in Illustrator again, it's going to reflect those changes, which is really, really nice, particularly when we're doing things like working with logos. All right, having said that, I'm going to go ahead and go to dsudorm.png. I'm going to select Place. As soon as I do that, I have the image attached to my cursor, and what Illustrator is doing is it's saying, all right, where do you want this placed? I could do a couple of things. I could just go up here. I want this to take up the entire sheet, so I could go up here starting in the upper left-hand corner and just click one time. That's going to bring it in at its default size, but I don't want to bring it in at its default size. I want it to fit this page. So I'm going to hit Command -sign a couple times. I'm going to then bring my mouse just outside of the upper left-hand corner. I'm going to click, and because Illustrator is placing this image, it's constraining the aspect ratio of this image, meaning I can't make it a square. Notice as I try and move this into different orientations or different aspect ratios, it holds it to it. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring it so that it brings up the whole page from top to bottom, and I'll go ahead and let go. I'll go ahead and hit Command 0 to bring us zoomed back into the document itself. And this is exactly where I want it to be, up and down, but I do want it to be shifted to the left a little bit. I think I'm going to put this Dixie State University logo over here to the left. So I'll go ahead and just shift this while holding down my Shift key. I'm going to go ahead and just use my selection tool to move this over. And as soon as I start to drag, hold that Shift key down, that's going to constrain it to that horizontal axis. I'm going to bring it over until about this point here and leave the DSU logo over there. Now, here's another thing that we need to talk about with Illustrator. When we talk about those layers like we did in Photoshop, layers do matter. What's on top of things in the layers palette are going to be on top of things in the document window itself. Now, Illustrator is a little bit different because it uses layers a little bit differently than Photoshop. We have elements and objects and components within our layers in Illustrator, but that hierarchy still applies. So as we look at this, we can see that because I brought that image in as the last thing, we can see that it's on top down over here. I don't want it on top, I want it on the bottom. So I can click it here on the layers palette, drag it, not until it's on top of that group. I don't want it to be that big blue rectangle. I want it to be just a blue line below it. I'll let go, and that's going to bring it down below everything else. Now, as we see this, we can see that this is kind of getting in the way of some of this type that we already have here on our chart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove some of the opacity out of this image and make it more of a watermark on the piece of paper that I would print out. I'll do that by clicking on the Properties palette. And I've got opacity right here. I'll go ahead and drop that down and I'll change it, and I think about 50% is going to be about right. If I click to deselect, you can see the text is easier to read. We still have an idea of what the image looks like, but it's easier to read. Having done that now, I'm just going to, with a single click, reselect it. And now I'm just going to lock this so that I don't accidentally or inadvertently move it. I'm going to go back to my layers palette. And this is my linked image right here. I'll go ahead and just click this box right here, which brings the lock on. And now I can no longer select this, and it makes it so that I don't accidentally select it. All right, the last thing I need to do is I need to use this logo right here. And this particular logo I can use from the UMac website for Dixie State University. It's umac.dixie.edu. I'm using this as educational, that's why I'm allowed to use it. It's not something you could just take without using or without asking or getting permission, that's okay. I'm using this for educational, so I'm going to go ahead and use it, but do make sure you get permission if you're using things you shouldn't be. I'm going to use the athletic mark. You know what, I'm not going to use the athletic mark. You know what, I will. That looks nice. This is the athletic mark. It's not the right logo for this, but it is one I use for this assignment. No big deal. I'll go ahead and select print. That brings it to my downloads. Of course, using good etiquette, we're never going to leave things in our downloads. We're going to double click it, or click it I should say, which is going to unzip it. Then I'm going to take this EPS file, which is the one I'm actually looking for, and I'm going to drag it out of my downloads and into my current working folder. That's good etiquette. That way you don't lose things you don't want to be losing. I'll go back to Illustrator. I'll select File, Place again. My folder is right here. There's the EPS file, the encapsulated PostScript file, which is a vector image. It attaches itself to my mouse. I'll just quickly draw a box right here, and there you have it. I'll go ahead and deselect over here. And as we look at this, this is exactly what we had in our example. Here's the example, here's the one we just did, and we are ready to go. Now, how do we get this out of Illustrator? I'm going to go ahead and hit Command S just to save. We can see that little asterisk went away, so I've got the AI file that's saved. I come over here to the File menu, select Export, Export for Screens, and then I've got a few choices. I've only got the one artboard to worry about, which is this one here. I'm going to go ahead and rename it. I'll call it Infographic. I'll even spell it right, because that would be good. And then over here, I've got Export To. I'm going to click on the folder, make sure that I put it into a location that I want it to be. I'll select Choose. Open Location After Export, I'm going to go ahead and leave that selected. And then right here where it says Format, I want to make sure that I've got the format I'm looking for, whether it be PNG, JPEG, SVG, or PDF. In my case, I want a PDF, just a very simple document. I do have the ability to add additional scales of this document. For this video, I'm not going to worry about that. And I'll select Export Artboard. Illustrator exports the artboard, opens up the folder that has my PDF in it, puts a folder inside there called PDF, and within there's my infographic all finished up and beautiful looking. Now this is a vector graphic, but one of the things we need to keep in mind, this image back here of the DSU Campus View Suites, that is not a vector graphic, that's a raster graphic, so we're concerned about resolution with that one. But these other graphics, these other elements of this infographic are vector graphics, and therefore we can resize them to our heart's content. All right, so that's a very simple infographic, and maybe simple being the key word. Maybe it wasn't so simple, but hey, it's very, very basic as far as Illustrator is concerned. It helps us to know how to get going with Illustrator and helps us to become better media producers in the future. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.